As 2025 winds to a close, we're kicking off a special week looking back at the biggest political moments of the year while also looking ahead to the big political moments to come. Of course, our front bench is back to help us with just that. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. It's also our last Monday front bench of the season before we come back in the new year, so I thought it was a good time to do this. Brian, if you had to pick, I mean, like, it was a very, very dry political year, obviously, here in Canada, but if you had to pick one big story, what is it for you?
Yeah, we never had anything to talk about during our panels.
No.
So, look, lots to choose from. There's no question. For me, it would be just Trump. It would be all the comments on the 51st state. It would be the trade war. It would be essentially his influence on the Canadian political scene. And I think it was a massive one. Because of him, in my humble opinion, the campaign kind of completely shifted for the Conservatives. It didn't feel like it was about affordability. Of course, that was still a very important issue, but it wasn't the issue. The Liberals spent the full campaign trying to find ways to talk about Trump. Obviously, it's a topic that merited discussion, but nevertheless, from a political point of view, they wanted to have Trump be the focal point because polling showed that those that cared and were worried about what Trump was saying and doing, they tended to be more in favor of having the Liberals guide the country through that. And then just the trade war overall and what it means for the economy. And that certainly has had, I think, a bit of a cloud over our economic prospects in 2025 and even beyond. So for me, all things Trump for the political story of the year here in Canada.
Just another 2.5, 3 years of that dominating things. Benzie, I think that flows well, as Brian kind of alluded to, well into what you say is the biggest story of the year.
Yeah, I thought this really builds off of what Brian was talking about, and it's the revival, the resurrection of the Liberal Party. Vassy, when we did our final show of 2024, the polling aggregators had, at least the Signal, the polling aggregator that the Star uses, had the Conservatives at 46%. And the Liberals at 18%. So that's a 28 percentage point lead that Mr. Poilievre had going into New Year's Day 2025. And Trudeau's departure, and tomorrow is the first anniversary of Chrystia Freeland's letter that started that ball rolling, you could argue, or at least accelerated that ball rolling down the hill. And then, of course, Mr. Trudeau leaves in January. And then Mark Carney literally comes out of nowhere, wins the leadership handily, in the Liberal leadership in March, and then wins an election in April, and nearly has a majority government. And it is that revival of a party that is a shapeshifter and is good at changing its principles. And that's probably one reason why the Liberals have governed Canada twice as long as the Conservatives have governed Canada in our history, is that they move with the times, I guess, or they move where the polls are going. And I have to say, I did not expect them to be in government in December 2025 when we were talking about it in December 2024. I really did think that Pierre Poilievre would be the prime minister, and it possibly would have been a Conservative majority government. And of course, that did not happen. And Mr. Poilievre, from that interview that you did today, Vassy, looks like he still hasn't absorbed that either.
I like how you're like marking the first anniversary. What are we doing to mark the anniversary tomorrow of Chrystia Freeland's resignation? Has it only been a year? Like, that's wild. Lisa, over to you. What do you think is the biggest story in your view of the year?
So obviously yesterday, seeing what happened in Australia and Bondi Beach is absolutely devastating. And actually, quite frankly, I'm really angry. And it made me think about Canada because one of the commentators said, when they were asked, how did you feel about it? She said, I was shocked, but not surprised. And I'm wondering how many Canadians are sitting out there right now, seeing what we're seeing, especially in the GTA area, every weekend of protests, of shouting, of fighting, of ugliness, quite frankly, of masked people with terrible signs picketing in communities inside the neighborhoods of the Jewish Toronto population. I'm wondering how many of the people out there right now would say, I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised. And if you find yourself thinking that you wouldn't be surprised if something like Bondi Beach happened in Canada, then you better write your MP, you better write the Prime Minister and ask them to stop it. Because I don't think politicians have stepped up near enough in this situation to stop what's happening in this country. And they have to, buck up, do something right, protect the people that live in this country. And for goodness sake, don't be the empty words when terrible things happen. Remember, you can be shocked, but please make sure that you're not surprised.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that. Oh my God, this weekend was like the most horrifying thing to watch ever.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. Tom, your thoughts on the big story of the year from your perspective?
Well, impossible for me not to start and say that I agree with Lisa in her analysis, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to take note of the fact that anti-Semitism is on the rise in this country, especially in my home province.
Yeah.
Montreal was just terrible since the October 2023 attacks. So, good on you, Lisa, for raising that. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that it was the crash and burn of the NDP in the last election. The last time the NDP lost party status, it was Jean Chrétien, and they had willfully gone after NDP seats. Chrétien had signaled it. Those were seats that he wanted. And this time around, they didn't even have to come up with a scheme amongst the Liberals. Canadian voters did it on their own. And one of the reasons that it was so easy for them to abandon the NDP, of course, was the famous deal that Jagmeet Singh made with Justin Trudeau. And once you make that deal and you say you're going to vote with the Liberals come hell or high water, how do you go on the doorstep and tell Canadians, oh, by the way, don't vote for the Liberals, bunch of scoundrels, vote for us? Mr. Singh paid a very heavy personal price. He finished third in his own riding. And that's not a personal statement against him. He's a wonderful guy, and I think a very good politician. But that one disastrous mistake, putting themselves into lockstep with the Liberals, I think came with a very heavy price. Look, you can decide that you're close enough to the Liberals, if they were governing on a certain number of issues, to be able to go along with them. But once you've made that deal, even though they get to point to new social programs for dental care and for pharmacare, and those are big honking changes in Canadian society that the NDP does get credit for within the NDP. But nobody else in Canada says, oh, good thing that the NDP did that. Now, we're going to see where they go with their impending leadership. We've talked about Poilievre's a fair bit. There is a leadership race on to lead the NDP. Very different visions. Avi Lewis coming at it with going after younger voters. Will they actually come out with a very, very left-wing view of our society? For me, there's an opportunity right now. The Liberals have never been further right, and there's a very large corridor that the NDP could be occupying, but it looks like they've decided, especially with the information I have on the sale of memberships, that Mr. Lewis is going to get that nod. And if that's the case, I think he might be putting himself at odds with a lot of Canadian public opinion. So we'll see how it works out for them.
I'll go round robin for the predictions for next year. And Tom, I'll just follow up with you, start you again. What do you think the big story next year is going to be?
So I listened carefully to a sentence that you said before, and you were saying, does it really change anything, the fact that they've got this potential majority? Would that change everything? And I don't think it would. I think that the ungovernability of a very close majority or an equally close minority is almost the same math. The only thing that really changes is the ability to get stuff through parliamentary committees, and that's not nothing. It's important. But my sense is that the Liberals at some point are going to look at the polls, look at the favorabilities of Carney versus Poilievre, and they're going to pull the plug. They're not going to wait to be defeated on something, and they're going to go for it. And the timing of that is usually, because the Liberal voters tend to be older, usually late spring. You want to have decent weather. April 28th was about the earliest you could go in Canada. Or they'll go in the fall. September, October would be propitious for them, because during the summer they could hand out checks and smile at everybody, and they wouldn't give Poilievre back his very good soapbox because he's outstanding at question period. They wouldn't have to have a single question period. They could roll straight into a late summer, early fall election. That's my prediction. The 2026 federal general election.
We're gonna start a pool on that. Lisa, your pick for the big story next year.
I think it's going to be the nosedive that the Carney Liberals are going to take in the polls, quite frankly. I think that by the time we get to June of next year, he's going to be deeply unpopular. And I think it all comes down to standard of living for Canadians. And it's going to start to bite and hurt a little bit more as the winter rolls on. I hope it doesn't. I hope I'm wrong, quite frankly. Happy to eat my words on national television. But I do see that happening. Whether or not Pierre's going to take advantage of it, I don't know. But I do see the numbers falling.
Benzie?
think the big story, the kind of feeding off what Brian said, was the big story this year. I think Donald Trump will be a big story for Canada next year, as he was this year. And I think we've got the Kuzma negotiations, the Kuzma review, rather, coming up. So that's going to be interesting. And I also think that Mr. Trump is going to see his power wane a little bit in the United States. The midterms will not be kind to the Republicans. I think the Democrats, despite themselves, will be able to make some gains next November. And I think we're going to see the kind of Trump as a lame duck. I'm not saying things will get better in the United States, but I'm not sure they will continue to get worse after the next midterms.
Okay, last word and last prediction goes to Brian.
Well, we definitely should have showed all of our predictions from 2024 in December.
I know.
And then,
I was thinking that I should have looked them
how
up.
this is absolutely a worthless exercise just to maybe make us sort of think of things. Nobody had Katy Perry entering Canadian politics fray on her bingo card. So
it's a big story for 2026, eh, Brian? Katy Perry, yeah.
So I'm going to go with the safe one. I'm going to agree with Benzie with a different slant to it. So I still think Trump is it. I think in a different slant, though. I worry a little bit, maybe to what Lisa was alluding to, for Canadians and the economy, that essentially something big happens on trade. And to bring in Benzie's point, that essentially he starts to see that he's maybe some type of lame duck, losing some ground, and does something bold, like rip up Kuzma, like more tariffs, whatever it might be. And if that happens, and that is going to be definitely a dark cloud on the Canadian economy, that I think will have some impact on the way that politics will go. And the only thing I'll say, though, to Tom's point, maybe governments will see their citizens rally around them as this happens, and maybe that is a time to go into an election if you want to sort of jump on it. Or to Lisa's point, maybe people are starting to get pretty worried about the future and they start to blame government. So I really think that will most likely be the most important factor in 2026.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for a great 2025. I appreciate your analysis so much.